ladies, my name is Rachel Hulse and I'm really glad to be working with you guys today. I'm bummed that I can't be there live, but if you have any questions after this session, please let Paige know and she will get those questions to me and I'll get them answered as soon as possible. This is going to be my little assistant today, Cora. Sorry, she's going to be coming in and out of the video. But a little bit about me. I grew up in Kansas City. I studied dance there, danced all the way growing up, went to college, to a conservatory to continue to study dance. I have been in Austin for 6 years. The entire time I have been teaching dance, teaching fitness, and dancing professionally. The company that I work the most with is called Dance Waterloo, and we're a site-specific dance company, which means that we create dance pieces in typically public places. So parks, we've danced at a skate park before, but it means that we're on a lot of different surfaces all of the time. Concrete, grass, wood, uneven surfaces, all of it. If you can think of it, we've probably danced on it. So through my time with the company, I have felt a very, very strong focus towards injury prevention because of the surfaces that we dance on. My profession is movement, so I want to make sure that I'm keeping my body healthy so that I can enjoy it and enjoy all the things that I like to do. So that's going to be our focus today, is injury prevention. You guys are working at home, you guys are working in a lot of different places, and my goal for you is that you continue to enjoy dancing and enjoy it pain-free, right? Pain doesn't have to be a part of dancing if we don't want it to be. So that is my goal for us today. I'm going to walk you through a couple of different exercises that you can do with me right now, and then use these as warm-ups prior to classes or rehearsals or whenever you are needing a little bit more stability. So let's talk about the whole warm-up, right? I have found that one of the best ways to prevent injury is just to be ready for what you're going to be putting your body through, right? So in college, I suffered several injuries that were due to the fatigue of the joint or fatigue of the muscle, that for the most part could have been prevented if I had warmed my body up properly before I got into my rehearsal space. So we are going to start from the feet and we're going to work all the way up the body, talking about several things you can do that are a gentle warm-up just to get you ready for what you're going to be asking your body. So as we go in to this short warm-up sequence, about 20 to 30 minutes, a couple of things that I want you to focus on. One is your breath. I want you to make sure that you're breathing throughout this entire sequence, okay? Choosing movements that you want to inhale on, choosing movements that you want to exhale on, just so we keep that cycle of breath moving. In addition, notice if there's any movements or poses where you want to hold your breath or you feel like your breath catches in your chest. I want you to notice those so that you can start to intentionally bring that breath back into it. All right. Second thing I want you to focus on is being intentional throughout this entire warm-up. So it's going to move rather slow, but there is going to be a lot of effort exerted in each pose and movement. So as we go through those, know that your goal is not to make the movements big, but our intention is to make the movements specific. As we work through the body, each movement is going to be focused on one part of the body, one muscle group, or one joint movement, while the rest of the body is still active in maybe holding stillness. Primarily, there's only going to be one aspect of the body that is moving at that time. So take your time with it, move slow, and try and keep those two things in mind. So first thing here, we're going to lie on our back, feet hip distance apart. You're going to take a couple of looks right and left, just relaxing through the sides of the neck, relaxing through the jaw. Placing both hands on the front of your pelvis, exhale to relax the ribs together so they're not lifting up away from the ground. Taking a couple of belly breaths here to relax the lower back. Placing those hands back down on the ground, you're going to begin to rock from the heels to the balls of the feet. Stretching through the calf and beginning to activate the front of the shin here. Warming up through the metatarsals and warming up through the arch of the foot. Then lifting that right knee up, we're going to take a point flex of the foot. Starting with that right leg here. Everything else is relaxed on the ground. Thinking about articulating through every part of the foot from the heel to the ends of the toes. As you point, I want you to flare those toes, flex them out. And then coming into a circle of the ankle, we're going to start circling to the pinky toe, finishing to the big toe. Reversing that, nice and slow, really warming up through the ankle here. Crunching the toes and then spreading them nice and wide. And we'll repeat this on the left side. Starting to the pinky toe, I want you to think about spreading the toes nice and wide, lots of space in between the toes. And then as they come back to that flex. As you circle the foot and you're starting to the pinky toe, I want you to think about spreading the toes to the pinky toe and then crunching through the big toe. As you reverse it, you're going to take that same motion, crunching as you circle to the big toe, flexing as you open to the pinky toe. Feeling that heat surround your ankle, it'll start to fatigue, and rest that foot. You're going to walk those heels until they barely touch your fingertips, still keeping them hip distance apart, and we're going to take some pelvis rocks. Your goal is not to lift the hips off of the ground. We're just trying to feel the floor along the entire back of the pelvis, turning on the lower abdominals, keeping the space between the chin and the chest, focusing on just that lower belly warming up. Then we'll begin a 4-count spinal roll-up. So that lower back is already warm here from those pelvis rolls. You can leave those hands up or place those elbows back down on the ground for a little bit more support. You'll start by curling the hips up into the ribs, then continuing through that mid-back, finishing with that upper back. As you roll down, that pelvis is the last thing to get to the ground. Warming up the spine, as well as the glutes and the hamstrings here. If you feel like you're holding tension in your neck, you can give yourself a little look right and left. You're going to keep that pelvic curl closed.
and then begin with a simple lift and lower. So we're not rolling through the spine anymore here. We're just lifting and lowering, engaging through the glutes, engaging through the hamstrings. Making sure that the knees aren't opening or closing as you take this lift, but they're going to stay hip distance apart. Pressing through the heels of the feet here. We want to make sure those heels stay underneath the knees. This last one, we're going to hold it up, squeezing through the glutes, closing the hips to ribs, keeping the space between the chin and the chest, taking the right hip down and recover. Left hip down. Taking a little hip twist. We are spiraling at that lower back here. As you do so, you're going to feel that weight transfer between your right and your left foot. Sending a little bit more heat, a little bit more weight into one leg at a time, and slowly lower those hips down to rest. Bringing the knees into the chest. Thinking about keeping a soft crease at the front of the hips, taking a gentle rock right and left, massaging the lower back into the ground. Rolling onto the side of your body, we're coming into our square leg lift. Your shins are going to be parallel to the front of your mat. Knees right in front of the hips. So we don't want them to have an open or closed angle. We want a 90-degree angle right in front of the hips, right behind the knee. Continuing to lift that leg while keeping the hips stacked one on top of the other. The knee is going to lift above that hip height. You'll start to feel some heat in that outer hip. And then we'll close the feet and open the knees, taking a square clamshell. Again, we're going to keep those hips stacked one right on top of the other. Warming and strengthening the outer hips will lead to great stabilization in the lower body and support for your lower back. And we'll lift that leg to your hip height and take a couple of extensions. Sending that heel right in front of the hip, stretching that leg out long. Still keeping those hips stacked. Working on that back of the knee extension. Sitting up tall as we transition to the second side, we're going to take a side body stretch. Lifting up and over those hips, twisting over the knees, and resetting to the second side. Shins parallel to the front of your mat, spine parallel to the back of your mat, 90-degree angle at the hips and behind the knees. We'll repeat those leg lifts on this second side, keeping the hips square, keeping the lower belly pulled in, using that hand in front just to stabilize. Keeping the feet together, coming into the square clamshell. Opening and closing the knees. So you'll be starting to find a rotation in the hip socket without allowing anything else to move. So there's no rotation in the lower back, no twisting or falling back of the pelvis. We lift the leg to find those leg extensions. Here I want you to try and reach the heel forward, feeling the back of the knee open. So you're getting your longest line in the leg here. Increasing the weight to the outer hip as you straighten that leg, sending the heel farther away from the body. Sitting up, sending those feet to the opposite side to lift up and over, feeling a side body and slight hip stretch. Then we're going to transition into our 4-point kneel. Keeping the toes tucked underneath, heels underneath the shoulders, knees underneath the hips. pushing back through the heels of the hands, sending the glutes back to the heels. Just warming up the fronts of the thighs and bringing some movement to the front of the hips. Double checking that those heels of the hands are underneath the shoulders, knees underneath the hips, ribs are closed, back is lengthened, back of the neck is lengthened as well. We press the shins into the floor to find our cat-cow. As you exhale, we draw the navel up into the ceiling, finding that full range of motion through the spine. Inhale, lengthening through the spine. We don't want to feel any folds here. We want to feel a long curve throughout this entire motion, getting your neck and your pelvis involved, pressing through the heels of the hands, pressing through the knees and the shins. Returning back to that neutral spine. We're going to keep the ribs closed here, squeezing through the shoulders and separating them. Warming up the upper back here. We're going to keep the elbows straight. Arms are straight as you slide the shoulder blades into the spine and then separate. Keeping the shoulders drop down away from the ears. Long sides of the neck. Exhaling as you lower the sternum to the ground. Inhaling as you bring it back in line between the shoulders. Stepping the foot back into your full plank. Taking that same hips to heels motion here, but from the full plank position, warming up the thighs. You're going to send those hips back, bringing the head in between the arms. Notice how the back of the neck stays long, in line with the spine. Continue to breathe here, not holding your breath, keeping the heels nice and high. Starting to feel that warmth in the fronts of the thighs. Lower those knees down. Sending the hips back, keeping the body pitched forward. So we have a 90-degree angle at the front of the hips. Lifting the body up. If you want a little bit more of a challenge, you can send those hands above your head, keeping the arms by the ears, keeping the warmth in the thighs. You want to keep that chest reaching up over your knees, pressing down through the fronts of the ankles, pressing down through the shins, keeping the body pitching forward, and relax it all the way forward, finding your child's pose. Returning to that 4-point kneel. We're going to take triangle push-ups here. The elbows are going to bend right to the sides of the body. Your nose is going to reach forward 6 inches in front of the fingertips, touching the mat, creating the top of your triangle. Your body will shift forward and down. Those hips are staying high. The elbows are squeezing into the midsection. What we don't want to happen is we don't want to be sending our hips back here. We want to shift all of the weight forward, sending the work into the backs of our triceps. Dropping the shoulders, keeping the shoulder blades separated. Coming down into our half plank. Walking the palms together, elbows right underneath the shoulders. If you feel like you're sinking here, we're going to lower those knees, slide the shoulders down, lift the back of the neck. Then you can always come back down here if you feel like that lower back starts to drop. We're going to take a single knee tap here. Noticing that the hips are staying nice and quiet. We're not lifting or lowering, simply softening at the back of the knee, controlling that walk. Then a double knee tap, still lifting up through that lower belly. Keeping the spine parallel to the ground, keeping the hips quiet. And we hold, breathing, lengthening eyes in front of the fingernails. Soften the knees and find your child's pose. Taking a couple more breaths in this child's pose. Relaxing the torso over the femur bones. We're going to start getting into our glute work. Here we're setting up on the forearms, elbows underneath the shoulders, squeezing that left heel into the glute, finding a hamstring extension. Stretching the knee long, and then bringing that heel back into the glute. I want you to imagine that your femur bone is staying on a tabletop. So there's no lifting or lowering of that upper leg bone. There's no tilting of the pelvis. We're keeping that spine long and lifted. Then we hold that heel in, and we're going to pretend we're lifting the ceiling with our heel. So we're not having any arching. There's no moving in the spine here. We're keeping that long body locked in and just hugging the heel into the glute. Finding that support right between the glute and the hamstring. As we hold the heel in, we're going to find a rotation. Wrapping the knee and rotating it open to the side. We don't want to be lifting the hip. There's no twisting in the pelvis. Here's where we're focusing on that really specific small movement. That's your true rotation here. Then we hold that knee open and slide that knee to the elbow. Coming around the side, engaging through those obliques, bringing the knee forward to the body without pushing ourselves back. Knee down, hips to heels, find that child's pose. And for that second side, I'm going to flip around. You can either come back down to those forearms, or you can come up. I'm going to show it on my fists here if you need a little break for those wrists. Taking the opposite heel, squeezing into the glute, sliding the shoulder blades down, and starting with that leg extension. Again, we don't want to have any arch here. We want to be lifting up through that center body. Back of the neck remains long. Upper leg bone stays on that tabletop. That bottom shin continues to press down through the ground. We hold the heel in, and now we press it to the ceiling. Feeling that pinch right between the glute and the hamstring. It's nice and small here. Notice there's no movement in that lower back. We're finding specificity in the movement here. Holding that heel in, we find our rotation. This is going to feel smaller than you want it to. We're just wrapping the femur bone right inside the hip socket. Nothing else gets to move here. We hold that knee open, and we're going to slide that knee forward to your elbow, finding those obliques, that nice, strong side body connection. Bringing the knee forward, not shifting the hips back. Find that child's pose. Continue to find that nice deep belly breath. Tucking the toes, lifting the hips to the ceiling. Walk those feet into your hands. Chin to chest, and we're going to find a little bounce here. Keeping the feet grounded. We're just taking a little bounce through the knees. Taking hands to the opposite elbow. We're going to feel everything nice and heavy pouring down. And then slowly begin to roll up, keeping those knees soft. Coming into our last little standing sequence here. We're going to take a heel bounce. So before we were bouncing through the knees, here we're keeping the legs relatively straight and taking a bounce through the heels. Letting everything feel nice and loose. You can see my hands, my arms are super wobbly here. Just let everything shake down to the feet. Staying in that parallel, feet are hip distance apart, taking a couple of demi-pliés. Here, focusing on your knees, tracking right over the second and third toe. Softening the feet, bringing those feet in, squeezing through those inner thighs. So here, I'm a little bow-legged, but even so, I'm still using the muscles to hug everything to the midline. So when I soften those knees, those muscles are still bringing those legs together, and I'm not allowing myself to rest back into a hyperextended knee. Focusing on the feet here. Spreading the toes nice and wide. We want to be careful that we're not rolling into the inner arch or to that outer pinky toe. Spreading the toes nice and wide whenever possible. So we're allowing our arch to stay open. And as you bend your knees, you're keeping the weight spread evenly between the ball of the foot and the heel. Toes are nice and light, so we're always checking that we're not curling the toes underneath. That is our last defense against imbalance. So we're going to take a couple of heel lifts here, a couple of eleves. And I want you to focus that those knees are tracking right over that second and third toe. When you get to that highest point and on the way up, the weight is in the center of the ball of the foot. So we're balancing on the ball of the foot, and those toes are light and they're ready to catch us if we need a little extra balance assistance. But we're not curling them underneath and we're not gripping them. Coming into a single leg balance here. Feet are hip distance apart, and here I want you to focus on your hip line. So we're going to pick up that right foot, just hovering it off the ground and taking a single leg bend. Your focus is keeping that knee over the second and third toe. We want to be careful not having any big circles here or super wobbly legs. If that is happening, go ahead and hold on to something sturdy until you can find that connection between the inner and the outer thigh. Still keeping the toes light, and we're going to hold that bend, extend the leg front and to the side. That right leg is still hovering. That base leg is still in a demi-plie. Hips are staying parallel. I'm going to rotate to the side for our second leg here. So we soften, lifting that left leg up, taking a single leg demi-plie. Here I want you to notice that that spine is sliding straight down and up as if it were sliding against a wall. So as you demi-plie, I want to make sure that we're not curling the pelvis underneath, but it's staying upright. Sits bones are going right to the backs of the heels. Holding that bend. And then we take that extension to the front and directly side. Keeping that pelvis upright. Taking this as slow as you need. Finding that stabilization in the outer hip. All right, ladies, you're doing great. We're almost there. We've made our way from the bottom of our feet. Now we are at our upper back and our neck. You're going to start by bringing those hands up to the back of your head, closing the elbows to the front, taking a chin to the chest, and then taking a high release upper back arch. As I curl forward, I am giving myself a little demi-plie, just encouraging that spinal flexion and extension. As you open, we want to keep the back of the neck lifted, yawning the armpits to the ceiling as you do so. And then you can take those arms open, feeling a stretch through the chest and then a stretch through the upper back here. Still keeping that head on top of the spine, so we don't want to break the line of the neck by crunching that head back. Bringing the hands behind the head, we're going to take an oblique stretch. elbows reaching to the side body. I don't want you to feel like you're folding the side bodies here. I want you to think that you are lifting up and over, finding a really long curve. Dropping the hands by the side, taking a side body, and then curving through the center to roll up. Here you can let those armpits slide down to the hip, chin to the chest. Take a little half, or rather a quarter circle of the neck. Still breathing here. And lastly, taking a spinal twist. Now, as you take that curve over to the right, we're going to drop that bottom hand to the opposite hip, and it's going to hold itself in place. So this spinal twist is very, very small. You're going to feel a stretch through that top shoulder as you take your eyes to the ceiling. You're going to feel maybe a little bit of heat underneath that top shoulder blade as it hugs into the spine, keeping the hips square to the front as you rotate. Clasping the hands at the back of the head, cradling the back of the skull. We're going to lift up and back, yawning the armpits forward, supporting the head as you rest down, keeping the ribs closed. So you're feeling that extension in the back without opening the ribs and losing control of the center.
That is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for sticking out this session with me. If you guys have any questions about any of the exercises or things that we talked about today, please let Paige know and she will get those questions to me. I hope that you will use some of these exercises and then get creative. Find something that warms you up, that you enjoy doing, that you can turn into your ritual before you get to rehearsing or getting into any practice for anything. Thank you guys so much. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day.